Hello everyone, I'm Adrifting, and today we're going to be covering The Great Storyteller by Im Han Baek. Um, I'm not Korean, so I don't know this genre as much. This is probably one of the licensed web novels by Reedy and Munpia, but that's going to the background. I'll go into some Korean background knowledge, but right now I'm just going to do a quick introduction preface. So, The Great Storyteller is one of my great all-time favorites. I have a long list of favorites, starring Hunter, Superstars of Tomorrow. I think I've discussed this before. They are the greats, the ones that everyone acknowledges is amazing. The Legendary Mechanic, I think that's much more. The Legendary Mechanic and Solo Leveling to me is much more hype. That's what it is, Lord of Mysteries, right? People call these the classics, Reverend Insanity, but like with all things in time, everything passes, right? Rebirth of the Strongest Sword God, The Thief Who Roamed the World, those used to be the old popular titles, in Wuxia World and Gravity Tales and Yoni Yoni translations, but things come and go. But these are my favorite collections. There's a couple servers, if you know where to look, where they talk all about these awards, right? Like the Dark Ossuary Prince, the Dark King, all of these great titles. And I've always talked about if there were titles I would cover the ones that I enjoyed the most. And these ones are the deep ones that at my core are who I am as a reader. Now, The Great Storyteller is much like See Possibility of Money Control. It's deep if you really go into it, but it's also a little bit niche, and I'll kind of get into that in a little bit. So let's go over a high-level overview, summary, various relevant information, and we'll dive deep into The Great Storyteller. I promised myself I'd cover it alongside Godfather of Champions. I never really did that justice, but I did what I could. Um, what is the X one? X rank supporters replay in a prestigious high school. I was going to do something along that lines of like the novel's extra, the author's extra, the villain wants to live, or overly um, omniscient reader's viewpoint. But those are such popular titles that someone will cover it if it's not me, right? Solo leveling, those are the popular titles. I want to cover the ones that no one has covered, but have a sense of wonder and miracle in them that I found that spark in web novels, right? Like Star Ranked Hunter, I don't think that'll ever get covered. It's an amazing comedic one. There are a couple other ones. What was it? It was The Guest by Rainbow Gate, right? That's an amazing one. Kumung or whatever. But The Great Storyteller is a rare Korean licensed one on web novel. But let's get into the summary and chapters and all that, and we'll get into some of the amazing ones. Superstars of Tomorrow had a very unique translator, Uncle Ben. Star Ranked Hunter had a unique translator community with gifs and memes. Oh my gosh, Star Ranked Hunter was amazing. I love the translators. But today we're going to be talking about The Great Storyteller. I covered this on my list of things I wanted to cover. Cthulhu Gone Falon, Godfather of Champions, The Great Storyteller. It's never changed. I've done this podcast. I've done like recordings of this so many times that I'm really excited. Unfortunately, I haven't read the chapters recently, but I don't think it's too relevant to a summary for a high level overview just to get you interested and unique into why you should read this. Anyway, let's get into it. We'll get into the summary, we'll get into the tags, we'll get into the preface, the chapters, the information that you probably want to know. If you want to, if you're not convinced, you want to dive into it, and I need to convince you. Okay, so let's start with the summary. Yun Woo is the youngest author in history to enter the literature world. His debut work was a massive hit, but this success was short-lived for the unprepared. A miraculous second chance comes his way one day. This is the beginning of that journey. The tags are mature, psychological, school life, seinen, and slice of life. This is a Korean novel. This is a personal gem. This is very famous among the Korean authors, right? The famous uh, what is it? Stop Skeleton something by Toika. He's a famous Korean author. There's a couple famous ones. This is very famous. Both the cover art is amazing. It's special. It's different. It's unique. It's so unique even in the Korean web novel genre because this slice of life covers something that no one else can. It's so niche, but it's so amazing. People rate this a personal gem just because it's so different. You get a lot of Chable novels, right, which is the urban life fantasy and like the rich young master lifestyle, Second Chance Rebirth, right? But what makes this one stand out? One is because when it was translated, when it was released, it was so different from all the Wuxia titles. but also the story and the topics it covered. This is very much like Simi Hyoak's About Death, um, the Mad Apartment on Webtoons. These are the deep introspective one. Anasuma Nawara, The Sound of Magic is what the Korean translates to. Um, but this one is about a young author who lived a failed life, he would consider. Um, it's translated by Sudi Owl, edited by Sudi Owl, and translated by Shansa. But they did a great job making this a very readable web novel. It was a great community. This A lot of the recommendations are very similar. God of Cooking, God of Music, both great titles. I Really Am a Superstar. That one was controversial and got canceled. Big Life, Genius of Performing Arts, High in Life once again. All of those are interesting, top management, business, and entertainment. This one covered much more about the writing world. This was a meta web novel which covered the web novel genre, but it really covered some very unique topics, very highly rated. Um, yeah, there's a lot of do-over web novels if you get into the genre. I don't think we are actually there yet. The do-over novel genre hasn't been saturated or translated yet. Um, but I think, yeah, it's definitely different from the rest. So it's not going to be your usual web novel. So we'll go into some of the details and some of the chapters, but there's about 394 chapters. So it's considering compared to some of the Chinese web novels, it's on the shorter side, but for, your average reader, like this is something you want to read daily. So this is about a year's worth of web novel content, a year's worth of web novel translations. We'll get into the character and the summary that really made the story so interesting. Yunwoo is also translated to Juho, right? Yunwoo is his writer name. Our main character's name is Juho. They're about the same. Okay, keep in mind, I'm not Korean, so I'm going to be using English pronunciations. Um, Yunho just means coincidence, and it goes through it's deep in the sense that it goes through very mature topics, very much like Yomawari Sensei, right? Rainbow, those type of manga titles where it just really goes in depth and it's hard hitting. Fushigi and a Shonen, just these very in-depth topics about life and about writing and in just a unique way. It goes through the story of a young writer, redoing his life in a way a little bit of wish fulfillment, but also it just talks about literature as a whole. There's very few novels that just talk about great works like Honoré Balzac, right? Old Goriot, Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea, right? This is very literature heavy. Murakami, the Japanese author, international author, very well renowned, right? Murakami, a friend of mine recommended me international literature. The House on Mango Street, whatever. Um, but like The Necklace by Guy de Maupassant. What was the play? Let me see if we can find the play on Wikipedia. Um, Not Anton Jean Gross, the author of the essay Francis Bacon. Um, The Man Who Laughs by Victor Hugo, right? Like all these great titles in literature, and when you're exposed to all that, whether it's great film or great literature or great art, you gain an appreciation and you gain a greater background into this. So this is from like a traditional book reader, like the people who read dictionaries, these bookworms. Um, there's a place to congregate, and it's not in libraries or on good reads where you're just bragging about the novels you've read, but just discovering great stories, right? Some people are very social and they connect, but for the internet people, the web novel readers, right, there's just a different space, right? Because it's just a different community. So they talk about these topics of fame, of life, and for a younger reader, for a teenage reader who's just kind of lost, this was an amazing story because it talks about friendships, it talks about writing, it talked about writing in a way of how you can look at the world, right? There were some amazing quotes and amazing stories in this about twins, about gold, right? Like various writing exercises that just really make you think, right? Like there's the stuff about time in here, right? I remember when I was reading this, it really made me contemplate time because I was really into time travel because of Steins Gate. I did like my previous web novel, uh, was it Cthulhu Gone Alone or one of my previous videos I covered time travel. I don't even know why exactly. Um, time and space. Let me see why exactly I covered that topic. Um, but like this is one of those web novels that it really changes the way you think. Um, Oh, we live in Nanjing, of course, because it's science fiction. Um, and so the topics and stories they use and the metaphors they go into, right? Dude, there are some amazing stories, right? The clams in the sea, where it's like, oh, who are you as a person? Do you change? Does the world change? This static dynamicism, right? Baksho family, right? There was this idea that, life is full of coincidences. That was the Fushigi Shonen um story that they wanted to use of reading Pluto at the time as well. But also like, who are you as a person? Like, we take snapshots of people, these static snapshots. There's a great Bilibili Huang Yi Dao You Du talked about like the amount of times we meet each other in life, right? The friendships we make, the clubs that we join, the literature club. This inspired me to take a similar route. I've done a lot in my life, and this gave me that romantic lens to in which to pursue certain hobbies, right? Whether it's writing. I wouldn't necessarily say this is like the be all end all for writing, but inspiration comes from anywhere. It talks about Agrippa, right? I know Agrippa, from Greek history, right? But just that concept of identity, who you are, of art, of storytelling. Are all stories even lies, right? Are stories telling the truth or are they lies? Doesn't matter. Um, does it reflect the world as a whole? What is considered a good story? This idea of how authors even communicate. There was a famous anime just about manga. Um, yeah, Bakuman. Yeah, sorry, I keep conflating Bakuman and Bakugan. So Bakuman was all about like the manga industry, right? This is all about. This isn't even just about. This isn't even about the web novel industry. This is not self-reflective. This is just telling an amazing story. I don't know what the inspiration is. Um, Definitely third person. Oh my gosh! But it talks about all these um unique styles, right? There's a little bit of fame, right? Like I really am a superstar. Like it doesn't go too much into the economics. Um, but the topics it covers and the uniqueness of the stories it tells is just so different. I remember wanting to research everything about it. The cover, it was through this cover that I think I found the artist Tathi Luadong, a Singaporean artist that they used for the covers. They eventually phased it out, I think, for other more hand-drawn covers, but like that's where they previously got a lot of their science fiction covers if you look at uh, Tati Luadong. So that was a very fun Yandex reverse image search because Yandex is better image search than Google. And that's come some of my background. But yeah, it was an amazing journey. I love the commenters, the readers. Honestly, reading is a very solitary activity, and the comment section is one of the few places. But it talks about jealousy. It was a very unique story for when I read it at the time. It's nothing super special, but it holds a special place, just like Godfather of Champions, because it expanded me to the genre. Um, it gave me that sense of romanticism about writing, right? Like we all have a certain image of what people do certain things, right? Like when you actually like, there's a famous meme of like readers look like a certain way, whereas the writers are just a mess, right? Artists are a mess. And this kind of goes into that pit of creativity of where inspiration comes from and that constant writing styles and that clash of inspiration of art of finding that artistry, right? Not just in pure art, but also in what you do and in life. And sorry, I'm using such romantic language, but this was an amazing web novel that I highly recommend. And I really hope I did this summary justice. I'll probably have to listen back to the audio and do the video editing, but this is an amazing story. I highly recommend it. This is, I would say, it's highly rated but it's not going to be what you're going to expect from a web novel. This is a more meta-based web novel. This is more story and in depth, if that's your style. If you want something more light and entertainment, there's plenty of that. So leveling the legendary mechanic. I'm not trying to gatekeep. I'm just trying to let you know that's what you're in for. And if you're looking for an amazing story, something like Anasuma Nawara, whatever the Madhouse is, Duty After School, like you want those type of stories, even Guardians of the Video Game, that one looks childish. It's so deep. The Great Storyteller is just one of those rare stories that I it's just hard to do because if the whole web novel like landscape was filled with this would be very boring. This reminds me a lot of starting over. I would never be able to cover starting over properly because that was literally one of the first web novels I've ever read alongside Janitor Son is Not a Hero, and I cannot I cannot bring back that time. Like that feeling of being a brand new web novel reader. I can talk about what it's like, but I can never fully capture that. Like you'd have to be a content creator who just started out, and just started reading web novels and categorizing that. This opened me up to the entire genre of Korean web novels. Right, a lot of the Korean web novels that are translated by web novelists kind of trash. Am I a God and whatnot, but if you know where to look, the Korean translators aside from the villainess novels, like there's some great ones out there, right? And some dungeon ones, dungeon defense. Like you can go into the mangas and the manhwas, and you'll find it like Volcanic Age and whatnot. But the storytellers, right? Like the famous millionaire and God of Money. Those ones are kind of meh. The trans obviously, but this I don't even know how they got to license this Reedy Munpia translation. They bought a stake in Munpia, and so did Kakao. Munpia is like soy sedu, or it's just one of the content aggregators or the publishers in Korea. So this is it's a rare title and it's amazing. And I feel like I'm dribbling here. But oh man, this is when this is when free passes. I pretty much spent all my free passes on this one web novel, and I don't regret it. I would want a published copy of this. If there are a couple books I would want a published copy of, and this is one of them. Oh man, I love to have a physical copy in the future. This is just amazing. This is a story I'd share. Yeah, sorry for the long drivel. I want to keep it short so the editing won't be too tiring. Um, but man, I hope you join the group of readers who read this story because it really deserves it. But as I said, this is not your classic wuxia power fantasy web novel. This is a do-over slice of life. This is like your urban life, slice of life fantasy. Like you kind of know the outcome roughly, but it's very open-ended and philosophical rather than focusing on a specific plot narrative. There are certain plot devices and certain characters, so we know the direction. But this is really a novel about stories, and that's what it made it so amazing. Um, there's a lot of side ones as well, like short and light and free, but I would never be able to do them justice. I never fully read it. I only cover the ones I fully read. Anyway, this is going on longer than it should have. I probably dragged this on an extra 4 minutes. Sorry for a lot of the meta commentary. So that was The Great Storyteller by Im Han Baek. Um, and we'll stop here.